I never thought a couple of Tiki torches on my patio would spark a war with the homeowners association. But that's exactly what happened one humid Tuesday evening in Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Kevin Carmichael, and I had just finished setting up what I considered to be the perfect backyard entertainment space. After years of renting cramped apartments in Phoenix, I finally bought my first home in the Sunrise Valley Estates development. The place was gorgeous, a Spanish-style house with terracotta tiles and a spacious patio that overlooked the desert landscape. I had spent the last 3 months making it my own, installing outdoor furniture, a small bar area, and yes, those Tiki torches that would become the bane of my existence. The evening air was cooling down nicely when I heard the sharp click of heels on my driveway. I was out on the patio, testing the Tiki torches I had just installed around the perimeter. They gave off this warm, ambient glow that made the whole space feel like a tropical resort. I was thinking about inviting some friends over for drinks when a woman's voice cut through my peaceful moment. "Excuse me, sir, what exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned to see a woman in her mid-40s marching across my lawn like she owned the place. She wore a pressed white blouse, khaki capris, and carried a tablet clutched to her chest like it was some kind of shield. Her blonde hair was cut in that severe bob that somehow always screams trouble, and her face was twisted into an expression of pure indignation. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I asked, setting down the lighter I had been using. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Sunrise Valley Estates HOA board. And you," she jabbed a manicured finger toward my Tiki torches, "are in direct violation of Section 7.3 of our community guidelines." I stared at her, then at my torches, then back at her. They're just decorative Tiki torches. Half the houses in this neighborhood have them." Patricia's face flushed red. "Open flame heating devices are strictly prohibited on any outdoor living space within the community. It's a fire hazard and creates an unsightly appearance that diminishes property values. They're bamboo torches with citronella oil. They keep the mosquitoes away and look great." She tapped furiously on her tablet. "I'm documenting this violation right now. You have 48 hours to remove them, or you'll face a fine of $250. For each day they remain after that, the fine increases by $100. You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm completely serious, Mr. Carmichael. We have standards in this community." "Perhaps you should have reviewed the HOA guidelines more carefully before purchasing property here." She turned on her heel and marched away, leaving me standing there with my mouth hanging open. I went inside and pulled up the HOA documents I had barely glanced at during closing. Sure enough, buried in page 47 of the dense legal text was Section 7.3, which prohibited open flame heating and lighting devices including but not limited to fire pits, outdoor fireplaces, and fuel-burning torches on patios, balconies, or yards. I slammed my laptop shut. The torches were mainly decorative, sure, but they did put out a nice bit of warmth during the cooler desert evenings. That's what I had liked about them. My neighbor, an older guy named Tom who lived 2 houses down, came over the next morning while I was drinking coffee on that same patio. "Heard you met Patricia," he said with a knowing grin. "Is she always like that?" "Like what?" "Controlling, aggressive, power-hungry." Tom laughed. "Yeah, pretty much. She's been HOA president for 3 years now. Drives everyone crazy, but nobody wants to run against her because being on the board is a thankless job. She's threatening me with fines over some Tiki torches." Tom nodded sympathetically. "She got me last year over the color of my mailbox, said it was off-white instead of cream. I had to repaint the whole thing, cost me $60 and a Saturday afternoon. That's insane." Welcome to Sunrise Valley Estates, kid. My advice, pick your battles. It's not worth the stress. But I wasn't the type to just roll over. I had worked hard to afford this house, scrimping and saving through my 20s, while working as an engineer at an aerospace company in Temp. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my slice of the American dream, and I wasn't about to let some petty tyrant tell me I couldn't have a few torches on my own patio. I spent that evening researching HOA laws in Arizona. Turned out homeowners associations had quite a bit of power, but they also had limitations. They had to follow their own bylaws, provide proper notice, and give owners a chance to appeal decisions. I drafted a formal appeal letter, citing that my torches were primarily decorative and used only occasionally, and that many other residents had similar setups that weren't being enforced against. 3 days later, I received a response. Not from Patricia directly, but from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Bradley Morrison from a law firm in Phoenix. The letter was cold and formal, denying my appeal and informing me that I now owed $500 in fines, as I had exceeded the initial 48-hour removal period. The torches had to go, or the fines would continue to accumulate. I was furious. I removed the torches that same day, stacking them in my garage, but the evening air on my patio felt different now, colder and less inviting. The Arizona desert could get surprisingly chilly once the sun went down, especially in the winter months, and I had genuinely enjoyed the warmth those torches provided. That's when I had my idea. If the HOA wanted to ban open flame devices, fine. But they couldn't stop me from using other heating methods. I went online and ordered the biggest, most industrial-looking propane patio heater I could find. The thing was a beast, standing nearly 7 feet tall with a stainless steel finish that gleamed in the sunlight. It cost me almost $800, but I didn't care. This was about principle now. The heater arrived 5 days later. I assembled it on my patio that Saturday afternoon, making sure it was positioned prominently where anyone driving by could see it. The thing put out an impressive 40,000 BTUs of heat and could warm an area of about 18 feet in diameter. It was glorious. I was sitting comfortably on my patio that evening, the propane heater humming softly beside me, when I saw Patricia's white Mercedes SUV slow down in front of my house. She stared at the heater for a long moment before speeding off. I raised my beer in a mock salute. 20 minutes later, she was back, marching up my driveway with that same determined stride. "Mr. Carmichael, that is not acceptable." "Good evening to you too, Patricia. What seems to be the problem?" "That," she pointed at my heater like it was a weapon of mass destruction. "That monstrosity violates the same section of the guidelines." "Actually, it doesn't. Section 7.3 specifically mentions open flame devices. This is a propane heater. There's no open flame. It's a sealed unit with a heating element. Completely different thing." Her face went through several shades of red. "The intent of the rule is clear. No outdoor heating devices that are unsightly or pose a safety risk." "The rule says what it says, Patricia. If you wanted to ban all heating devices, you should have written that, but you didn't. You specifically banned open flame devices. This isn't one of those. We'll see about that." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my heater from multiple angles. "This will be brought before the board at our next meeting. I can guarantee you won't win this fight." "Looking forward to it," I said, turning back to my beer. But Patricia wasn't done. Over the next week, I started noticing her driving by my house at different times of day, always slowing down to stare at my patio. Tom told me she had been asking neighbors about me, trying to find any other violations she could pin on me. She was obsessed. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening, held in the community center near the entrance of our development. I had never been to one before, and I was surprised to find about 30 other residents there, filling the rows of folding chairs. Patricia sat at a table up front with 4 other board members, all of them looking varying degrees of bored except for her. She looked like a general preparing for battle. "Item 7 on tonight's agenda," Patricia announced, reading from her tablet. "Violation of community standards by Kevin Carmichael of 4782 Desert Willow Drive regarding installation of industrial heating equipment in violation of Section 7.3. I raised my hand. "I'd like to address the board." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Residents may speak during the public comment period. This directly concerns me. I think I should be allowed to respond." One of the other board members, a tired-looking man named George, waved his hand. "Oh, let him speak, Patricia. We all want to go home." I stood up and walked to the front of the room. "The heater on my patio is not in violation of Section 7.3. That section specifically prohibits open flame devices. My propane heater is a sealed unit with no open flame. It's no different from the electric heaters I've seen on at least 4 other patios in this neighborhood." "Those are electric," Patricia interjected. "Electric heaters are acceptable. Propane heaters are fuel-burning devices that create a flame. Inside a sealed chamber, there's no open flame. The rule is very specific about open flames." An older woman on the board, whose name tag reads Susan, spoke up. "Do you have the manufacturer's specifications for this heater?" I did. I had brought a whole folder of documentation. I handed over the specs, which clearly stated the heater operated with a sealed combustion chamber and included multiple safety features that exceeded industry standards. Susan reviewed the papers and passed them to the other board members. "This does seem to be a different situation from the Tiki torches. The language in our guidelines is quite specific about open flames." Patricia snatched the papers. "The spirit of the rule is to prevent unsightly and dangerous heating devices." "But the letter of the rule is what matters legally," George said. "We can't enforce violations based on what we wish the rule said. We have to enforce what it actually says." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "Fine. If the current board won't support proper enforcement, I'll call for a revision to the guidelines." The board took a vote. 3 members voted that my heater was not in violation. Patricia voted that it was. The 5th member abstained. I had won, at least for now. I should have known Patricia wouldn't let it go. Over the next 2 weeks, she launched a campaign to revise the HOA guidelines. She sent out lengthy emails to all residents, warning about the dangers of propane heaters and arguing that we needed stricter rules to maintain property values. She included cherry-picked statistics about propane accidents and even attached photos of industrial accidents that had nothing to do with residential patio heaters. Most residents ignored her emails, but a few seemed to take her side. I started getting dirty looks from some neighbors when I was out on my patio. One woman, whose name I didn't even know, shouted from her car that I was going to burn down the whole neighborhood. Then things got weird. I came home from work one Wednesday to find my heater tipped over on the patio. The propane tank had been disconnected and was lying several feet away. At first, I thought maybe it had been knocked over by wind, but there hadn't been any storms. Plus, the propane connection had been deliberately unscrewed. Someone had tampered with it. I checked my security cameras. I had installed a basic system when I moved in, mostly focused on the front door and driveway. But one camera had a partial view of the patio. I scrolled through the footage from that afternoon and felt my stomach drop. Patricia was clearly visible, entering my backyard through the side gate around 2 in the afternoon. She looked around nervously, then walked straight to the heater. The video showed her trying to move it, struggling with the weight. She managed to tip it over, then unscrewed the propane connection. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. Then she left the same way she came. I was shocked. This wasn't just HOA overreach anymore. This was trespassing and vandalism. I saved the video footage and called the Scottsdale Police Department. The officer who responded was a young guy named Officer Martinez. He watched the video footage twice, making notes. "So this woman is your HOA president?" he asked. "Yes. We've had a dispute about the heater, but I didn't think she'd do something like this." "Have you had any other interactions with her that felt threatening?" I told him about the constant drive-bys, the emails, the board meeting confrontation. He nodded and took down all the information. "I can file a report for criminal trespassing and vandalism. The property damage is minimal, which would make it a misdemeanor, but it's still a crime." "Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to let it go to avoid escalating things further. But another part of me was tired of being bullied. "Yes, I want to press charges." "All right. We'll contact Miss Henderson and likely issue a citation. Given that this is a first offense and relatively minor, she'll probably just pay a fine and maybe get probation, but it'll be on record." Officer Martinez left, and I spent the evening replaying the video footage in my mind. What kind of person did something like this over a patio heater? It was unhinged. The next morning, I got a frantic call from Tom. "Dude, what did you do? Patricia is losing her mind. She just posted in the neighborhood Facebook group that you're trying to have her arrested over a simple misunderstanding." I pulled up the Sunrise Valley Estates Facebook group on my phone. Sure enough, Patricia had written a long, rambling post about how she had gone to my house to inspect a safety violation and had accidentally bumped into my heater while checking the propane connection. She claimed I was now trying to criminally prosecute her for doing her job as HOA president. The post had dozens of comments with residents taking sides. "This is insane," I muttered. "I'm telling you, man, Patricia doesn't know when to quit, but falsifying what happened, that's a new low even for her." I responded to her post with a simple message. "I have security camera footage showing exactly what happened. Miss Henderson entered my property without permission and deliberately vandalized my heater. I've filed a police report because what she did was illegal." The Facebook group exploded. Some people demanded to see the footage. Others accused me of fabricating the whole thing. A few residents who had their own negative experiences with Patricia came out of the woodwork, sharing stories of harassment and overreach. 2 days later, Officer Martinez called me. "We've issued a citation to Patricia Henderson for criminal trespassing. She's pretty upset, says she was just doing her HOA duties, but that's not how the law works. She'll have to appear in court next month." "What about the vandalism charge?" The prosecutor decided to just go with trespassing. "It's easier to prove, and frankly, tipping over a patio heater doesn't result in enough damage to make vandalism charges worthwhile. But the trespassing charge is solid." I felt a mix of relief and frustration. On one hand, Patricia was facing consequences. On the other, it felt like she was getting off easy. The atmosphere in the neighborhood became increasingly tense. Patricia sent out another mass email, this time threatening to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. Her email was so unhinged that even her supporters started to back away. She claimed I had installed the heater specifically to antagonize her, that I was part of a conspiracy to undermine the HOA board, and that my criminal harassment had caused her severe anxiety. I forwarded the email to Officer Martinez, who told me to save everything but not to engage directly with her. The situation hit a breaking point at the next HOA board meeting. I didn't plan to attend, but Tom convinced me that I should, if only to show that I wasn't intimidated. The meeting room was packed, far more crowded than the previous one. Clearly, word had spread about the drama. Patricia sat at the board table looking haggard. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. "Order," she snapped, banging a gavel on the table. "This meeting will come to order." George, the tired-looking board member, cleared his throat. "Patricia, before we begin, the board needs to discuss your recent actions regarding Mr. Carmichael's property." "There's nothing to discuss. I was performing my duties as HOA president. You were cited for criminal trespassing. That's not performing your duties, that's breaking the law." The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia's face flushed. "I was checking a safety violation. The police are overreaching." Susan, the older board member, shook her head. "Patricia, we've reviewed the security footage that Mr. Carmichael shared with us. You weren't checking anything. You deliberately damaged his property." "I did no such thing. The video is very clear." Susan looked tired. "The board has discussed this, and we're voting tonight on whether to remove you as president." Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "You can't do this. I've dedicated 3 years to this community. I've maintained standards when no one else cared." "You've also harassed residents, misused your authority, and now committed a crime," George said quietly. "This has gone too far." The vote was unanimous. Patricia was removed as HOA president, effective immediately. She grabbed her tablet and purse and stormed out, but not before turning to glare at me. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You'll regret this." After she left, the energy in the room shifted. People started talking, some sympathetically about Patricia's fall from grace. Others relieved that her reign of terror was over. Susan was appointed interim president, and she immediately addressed the room. "Moving forward, this board is going to focus on genuine safety and maintenance issues, not petty enforcement of minor aesthetic preferences. We've lost sight of what an HOA is supposed to be: a tool to maintain our community, not a weapon to control our neighbors." People actually applauded. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But Patricia wasn't done. Her court date for the trespassing charge was scheduled for 3 weeks later at the Scottsdale Municipal Court. I was called as a witness. The courtroom was small and informal, nothing like the dramatic TV courtrooms I had imagined. Patricia sat with a lawyer, a severe-looking woman in a gray suit who kept whispering to her client. The prosecutor, a young woman named Miss Chen, presented the case efficiently. She showed the security footage, had Officer Martinez testify about his investigation, and called me to describe what I had found when I came home that day. Patricia's lawyer argued that her client had been performing legitimate HOA duties, that entering properties to inspect potential violations was within her authority, and that the heater falling over was an accident. The judge, an older man named Judge Brennan, didn't seem impressed. "Miss Henderson, did you have written permission from Mr. Carmichael to enter his property that day?" "No, Your Honor, but as HOA president, HOA authority does not override private property rights. You needed either permission or a legitimate emergency to enter his backyard. From what I can see in this video, you deliberately tipped over his heater and disconnected the propane tank. That's not an inspection. That's vandalism. I was concerned about safety, Your Honor. Then you should have filed a formal complaint and gone through proper channels. Instead, you took matters into your own hands, literally." Judge Brennan looked down at his notes. "I'm finding you guilty of criminal trespassing." You're sentenced to 40 hours of community service, 12 months of probation, and you're to have no contact with Mr. Carmichael beyond what's absolutely necessary for HOA business. And since you're no longer HOA president, that should be easy." Patricia's face crumpled. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm as the judge continued. "Additionally, I'm ordering you to pay restitution to Mr. Carmichael for any damages and his time dealing with this matter. That amount will be determined at a separate hearing. Do you understand these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, vindication, but also a kind of sadness. Patricia had let her need for control consume her to the point where she destroyed her own reputation and ended up with a criminal record. Over what? A patio heater. Tom took me out for a celebratory beer that evening at a sports bar in Old Town Scottsdale. "So it's really over?" he asked. "I think so. She's on probation and can't contact me. The new HOA board seems way more reasonable. Yeah, I think it's finally over." "What are you going to do about the heater?" I laughed. "Keep using it, obviously. I paid $800 for that thing." But the story wasn't quite finished yet. 2 weeks after the court hearing, I received a notice about the restitution hearing. The judge would determine how much Patricia owed me for damages and related costs. I hadn't really thought much about this part. The heater hadn't been damaged, and my main costs had been time and stress, which weren't exactly quantifiable. I showed up to the hearing with documentation of everything. The cost of the heater, the cost of my security camera system that had caught Patricia in the act, my time off work to deal with police reports and court appearances, and even the therapy session I had gone to because the stress had been affecting my sleep. Patricia's lawyer argued that I was trying to profit from the situation, that most of these costs weren't directly related to her actions. Miss Chen, the prosecutor, countered that all of these expenses were direct results of Patricia's decision to trespass and vandalize my property. Judge Brennan reviewed everything carefully. "Mr. Carmichael, I'm not going to award you for the full cost of your security system, as that's a general home improvement that provides ongoing benefit. However, I am going to award you for the heater cost, lost wages from taking time off work, and your legal consultation fees. That comes to $1,200. Miss Henderson, you have 60 days to pay this amount." Patricia looked like she might cry. Her lawyer helped her stand, and they left quickly. I felt no joy in her obvious distress, just a sense of closure. Life gradually returned to normal in Sunrise Valley Estates. Susan proved to be an excellent HOA president, focusing on actual issues like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events. The annual holiday party that December was the best attended in years, with neighbors who had been intimidated by Patricia's reign finally feeling comfortable participating in community life. I became friendly with several neighbors who had their own Patricia horror stories. There was Marcus, who had been fined repeatedly for parking his work van in his own driveway because Patricia deemed it commercial use. There was Jennifer, who had been threatened with legal action because her front yard rock garden used stones that were allegedly the wrong size. And there was elderly Mr. Walters, who had nearly sold his house and moved after Patricia threatened him over his grandchildren's basketball hoop. We started a tradition of gathering on my patio on Friday evenings, gathering around that propane heater that had started everything. It became a symbol of sorts, a reminder that standing up to petty tyranny was worth it, even when it was difficult. I ran into Patricia once, about 6 months after the court hearing, at a grocery store in Scottsdale. She was in the produce section, looking thin and tired. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw something that looked like shame cross her face before she quickly turned away. I didn't approach her. There was nothing left to say. Tom told me later that Patricia had resigned from the HOA board entirely after completing her probation. She was selling her house and moving out of Sunrise Valley Estates. Part of me felt bad for her, but a larger part recognized that her downfall had been entirely self-inflicted. She had taken a minor disagreement over decorative torches and escalated it into a criminal case because she couldn't tolerate anyone challenging her authority. The spring after everything went down, the HOA board finally got around to revising the community guidelines. Susan called a special meeting where residents could provide input on what rules actually mattered and what was just unnecessary bureaucracy. "We've got 87 pages of regulations," Susan said, holding up the bound document, "most of which nobody reads and half of which are unenforceable or outdated. Let's talk about what we actually need." The conversation was refreshing. People suggested focusing on legitimate safety issues, maintaining shared spaces, and ensuring the neighborhood looked generally well kept without being oppressive about every minor detail. The question of heating devices came up, naturally. "I move that we simplify Section 7.3, George said. "Instead of listing specific devices, let's just say that any outdoor heating device must meet current fire safety codes and be used in accordance with manufacturer specifications. If it's legal and safe, residents should be allowed to use it." The motion passed unanimously among both the board and the residents present. I actually felt emotional about it. This simple, reasonable approach was what should have existed all along. If Patricia had been willing to be flexible and reasonable, none of the conflict would have happened. My friends came over for a barbecue that weekend to celebrate the guideline changes. It was a perfect Arizona evening, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of mesquite and creosote from the desert. My propane heater glowed in the corner of the patio, not because we needed it, but because I wanted it there as a reminder. My buddy Derek, who had heard the whole saga unfold over months of phone calls, raised his beer. To Kevin, who went to war with his HOA over a heater and actually won. "I didn't want to go to war," I protested. "I just wanted to sit on my patio in peace." "Sometimes peace requires fighting for it," my friend Sarah said. "You stood up to a bully when it would have been easier to just comply. That matters." As the evening wore on and my friends left, I stayed outside, enjoying the quiet and the warmth from my heater. I thought about everything that had happened, from that first confrontation with Patricia to the court hearings to the community coming together to reform the HOA. It had been exhausting and stressful, but it had also been weirdly rewarding. I had learned that HOAs could be tools for genuine community building or weapons of petty control, depending on who wielded them. I had learned that standing up for yourself sometimes required going through uncomfortable confrontations and legal processes. And I had learned that most neighbors, when freed from the fear of arbitrary enforcement, were actually pretty great people. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Backyard looking cozy. That heater really ties the space together, man." I smiled and replied, "Worth every penny and all the drama." And honestly, it was. Not because the heater itself was some irreplaceable amenity, but because fighting for the principle of being able to make reasonable choices on my own property had been worth it. I had bought this house to have a place that was truly mine, where I could relax and live without someone constantly looking over my shoulder. Patricia had tried to take that away, not out of any legitimate concern, but out of a need to control and dominate. The irony was that if she had approached the whole thing differently, if she had come to me as a neighbor instead of a tyrant, we probably could have worked something out. Maybe I would have agreed to only use the Tiki torches occasionally, or to position them differently, or any number of compromises that reasonable people make with each other every day. But she had chosen confrontation and escalation at every turn, and it had cost her everything. I heard later through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had moved to a condo in Phoenix, a place with no HOA at all. Maybe she had learned something from the experience, or maybe she was just bitter and would spend years blaming everyone but herself for what happened. I didn't know and honestly didn't care. She was out of my life, and that was enough. The following year brought its own challenges and joys. I got promoted at work, which meant longer hours but better pay. I started dating someone I met at a friend's party, a teacher named Rachel Johnson who thought the whole HOA saga was hilarious. "You really went to court over a patio heater?" she asked the first time she came over to my place. "Not exactly. I went to court because someone trespassed on my property and vandalized my stuff. The heater was just the excuse she used." Rachel looked at the heater, which was humming away on that slightly cool November evening. "Well, I appreciate it. This thing is cozy." As months turned into over a year since everything started, Sunrise Valley Estates continued to improve under Susan's leadership. The HOA started focusing on things that actually mattered to residents: organizing neighborhood watch programs, maintaining the community pool and park areas, and negotiating better rates for shared services like landscaping of common areas. The oppressive atmosphere that had existed under Patricia's presidency was completely gone. I became more involved in the community myself, attending board meetings regularly, and even volunteering to help with the annual spring cleanup day. It felt good to be part of something positive instead of constantly fighting against something negative. One evening, almost 18 months after my initial confrontation with Patricia, I was sitting on my patio with Rachel when she asked me a question that made me think. "Do you ever regret how everything went down? Like, do you wish you had just taken down the Tiki torches and avoided all the drama?" I considered this carefully. "Honestly, no. I mean, it sucked going through it. The stress, the conflict, having to go to court, all of that was terrible. But if I had just rolled over, Patricia would have kept doing the same thing to other people, and I would have set a precedent for myself that I'll just accept unreasonable treatment to avoid conflict. So it was about more than the heater. Way more than the heater. It was about being able to live in my own home without being bullied by someone who got a power trip from controlling her neighbors." Rachel squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you fought. Even though we hadn't met yet, I'm glad you did." The propane heater became something of a legend in the neighborhood. New residents moving in would sometimes ask about it after hearing the story from older neighbors. It had become a symbol of the community's transformation from an oppressively managed development to an actual neighborhood where people looked out for each other rather than trying to catch each other in violations. Tom organized a second anniversary party that summer, 2 years after Patricia's removal from the board, themed around celebrating good neighbors. Half the neighborhood showed up, filling my patio and spilling into the backyard. The heater sat in its usual spot, not running because it was June in Arizona and nobody needed extra heat, but present as a reminder of what we had all been through together. Susan gave an impromptu speech, thanking everyone for making Sunrise Valley Estates feel like a real community. 2 years ago, people were afraid to put out holiday decorations or plant flowers in their own yards without checking 18 pages of guidelines. Now, we have people hosting block parties and looking out for each other's kids and actually talking to each other. That's what a neighborhood should be. As people cheered and chatted, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. I had bought this house hoping for a peaceful place to call home, and after fighting through the conflict with Patricia, I had actually found it. Not because the conflict was fun or easy, but because standing up for reasonable treatment had helped transform the entire community. Rachel and I got engaged that fall. She moved into my place, bringing her own touches to make it our home together. She loved the patio as much as I did, and we spent countless evenings out there, sometimes with friends, sometimes just the two of us, always with that propane heater standing guard in the corner. "You know what I think?" Rachel said one evening as we watched the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. "I think Patricia actually did you a favor." "How do you figure that?" "She forced you to stand up for yourself. She made you get involved in the community. She brought all the neighbors together against a common problem. Without her being so terrible, none of the good stuff that followed would have happened. Everyone would have just stayed in their own little bubbles, afraid to step out of line." I had never thought about it that way, but she was right. Patricia's tyranny had been the catalyst for positive change, even though that wasn't her intention at all. In trying to control everything, she had ultimately lost everything while the community she tried to dominate became stronger. Years passed. Susan eventually stepped down as HOA president, replaced by Marcus, the guy who had been hassled about his work van. Under his leadership, the HOA continued to focus on actual community building rather than rule enforcement. The development won awards from the city of Scottsdale for its community involvement programs and well-maintained common areas. I never saw Patricia again after that chance encounter in the grocery store. I heard through the grapevine that she had gotten involved in her condo association, but apparently had learned from her mistakes and was taking a much more collaborative approach. I hoped that was true. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow from their mistakes. The propane heater lasted for years, faithfully providing warmth on cool desert evenings. When it finally gave out, I replaced it with an identical model. By that point, it wasn't even about defying the HOA anymore. It was simply part of my patio setup, as normal and unremarkable as the furniture or the grill. Rachel and I eventually had kids, a daughter named Maya and a son named Luke. They grew up playing in that backyard, with the heater as part of the landscape of their childhood. When Maya was old enough to understand, she asked me about the story of the heater, having heard bits and pieces from neighbors. I told her the whole thing, from the Tiki torches to the court case to Patricia's resignation. She listened carefully, her face serious. "So the lady was just being mean for no reason?" she asked. "She thought she had good reasons. She thought she was protecting the neighborhood, but she got so focused on rules and control that she forgot about being kind to people." "Did you forgive her?" That question stopped me. Had I forgiven Patricia? I thought about it for a long moment. Yeah, I think I have. I don't forget what happened, but I don't hate her for it anymore. She made mistakes, big ones, and she paid for them. That's enough for me. Maya nodded, satisfied with this answer, and ran off to play. But the question stayed with me. Forgiveness hadn't been a conscious decision, I realized. It had happened gradually as time passed, and the positive outcomes of that difficult period became clear. The conflict had transformed our neighborhood for the better, had brought Rachel into my life through the connections I made, had taught me to stand up for myself while also being part of a community. Looking back now, sitting on that same patio where everything started so many years ago, I can see the whole arc of the story clearly. It started with a simple desire to make my outdoor space comfortable and inviting. It escalated into a battle over property rights and personal freedom. It ended with a stronger community and valuable lessons learned by everyone involved, including me. The propane heater is still there, of course, humming quietly on cool evenings. But it's not a weapon or a symbol anymore. It's just a heater, doing what heaters do, providing warmth and comfort. And that's exactly how it should be.